Okay. Hello, Shiloh.
Hi there, Mick.
Yeah, this is just calling from the. I'm calling on behalf of the Desirable Vinyl Group here in the UK, and I just wondered if I can ask you a few questions.
My pleasure indeed. An honour indeed to be interviewed by somebody who hails from Liverpool.
Yeah. Okay. You'll never walk alone, mate.
I hope not.
All right. Let's get started then. A few things I'd like to ask. Your musical influences at an early age. I mean, can you remember the first time music really sort of made a difference in your life as early as possible?
Mick, that's an interesting question. I was brought up in the days of the 60s. I was a little boy. My parents used to go to the dances at the Salisbury Country Club, and I used to watch Top of the Pops on the box. We were very lucky. We had television in Rhodesia in the late 60s, so that had a large influence on my music. And then, of course, back in Cape Town, they used to go to these dances, and all you would hear is, to be honest with you, the Hot Rocks, Rolling Stone collection, or Beatles. So that was really the first, like probably most people, the first music I ever really that hit me was probably the Beatles.
Okay, but I know there's probably so many, but your sort of first single, your first album, or groups, or any or all of the above that just blew you away when you first heard them?
Could be embarrassing. Well, Lola the Kinks. I mean, I think probably many bought that. That was my first 7 single. It was always a shortage of money where it came from. I didn't come from a very wealthy family, so I used to work at the bottle store delivering bottles of wine on a bicycle, and then I had enough money to buy 1 LP a week, which wasn't bad, and go to the local bug house, the old flick or cinema. And so only at that stage, I would say my first LP was probably Let It Be by the Beatles. That would be the first one.
I just recently got the studio sessions of that one. But anyway, your first radio broadcast. When did you first start broadcasting on radio? Where did you transmit from?
Well, I was working in Israel, and I had a great passion for music, and I met an Israeli chap who worked at the Peace Cafe in Eilat, and he said he had a friend on Radio HaShalom. At that stage, it wasn't a boat out at sea; it was land-based. The government closed it down, and then it went to the boat out at sea. So that my first sort of rather awkward midnight slot was actually on Radio HaShalom, which was known as the Voice of Peace in Israel. And this was about late mid-70s.
Okay. Now, but so now you're on the Magic Bus now, and coming out of Cape Town. This is your third year now, I believe, of radio airing.
That is 100% correct. We're celebrating my third year into the Magic Bus.
Okay, well, congratulations on that. And you've got some extended shows over the Christmas period as well, I believe.
Correct. We're doing New Year's Eve, 6 p.m. all the way through till 1 a.m. That is so the guys can put out the barbecue or the braai and so forth. And then New Year's night and Christmas night, 9 to 12. Quite normal, as per the normal Saturday.
Okay, all right. Now, your BRC Rams, the Broadcast Research Council of South Africa, has your radio audience measurement constant until midnight, which seems quite unusual. But what would you say about that?
Yeah, I must say, I discovered that myself. Nobody came and informed me about that, and I also found that rather unusual. And I don't think it's necessary loyalty, because a lot of the older guys, older than me, they say their good nights to me around about 11 o'clock. They WhatsApp me on air. I think there's a fresh listenership that kicks in. People that have been watching movies or come back from restaurants or the movies or cinema, they click in at 11 o'clock. I think you also know, Mick, that the music is a little bit more progressive from 11 to 12, longer tracks. So that's my opinion. It is rather unusual that it's constant. I've never seen Rams that remains constant till midnight hour. It's just not normal. And it says a lot for the Magic Bus. It really does. And I'm excited to see the new Rams, which was over the COVID period.
Yeah. Well, it just obviously attests to the quality of the music you play. And in my opinion, I think that's great.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. From from what I understand, you don't just present the radio show, but you actually put it together yourself. You know, you program, you put everything in your program on your own. Wouldn't you say that's a bit unusual in relation to other major radio shows, stations?
Definitely, very definitely. Look, not in the 60s and 70s, but in these days, definitely on radio. For a presenter to compile, you might find it on a community radio station, but not on a big commercial station as Cape Talk, EWN, Cape Talk Classics, which is under the Prime Media umbrella. So that is extremely unusual. I fully agree.
Well, you don't often sort of mention the position the song reached on the charts or the exact date or year. I know sometimes you do, but you tend to go more into a little bit more detail than rather just chart position. Any comment on that?
Yeah, look, I don't read from a book. I don't have a list, or I don't have a Google in front of me. I just don't have the passwords for that. So I don't try, you know, every now and then, if a song has been a hit single, I would say this was a hit single. I don't believe whether it's a #3 or #4 is going to make a big difference. But if there's a guitar break and it's, say, Jimmy Page and not Ray Davies or the Kinks, I like to mention that. So I try to bring the character of the song and the information of the song to bring and highlight. For example, if it was the first use of, say, The Raven by Alan Parsons, the first use of the vocoder, which is a voice distortion instrument, then I would rather mention that because that is historically significant. Or the use of, say, Moog synthesizer with, say, Tommy James and the Shondells, then again, remind people this was actually a top of the chart song. We all know it hit the top of the charts. Whether it was a #3 or #1, I don't believe it. It has a big impact on the listener. But what I must confess that if I say 1968, 69, it's just to cover myself. Because if you say a date and you're incorrect, gosh, you get laced from the lamppost.
Yeah, okay. So you say you don't use your book to refer to, but I think there's enough information in your head anyway with your experience. But
it wouldn't be practical. It wouldn't be practical.
You also you refer to London's record collector and not Rolling Stone. Any comment there?
I rank and I rate London Record Collector magazine as a far greater honor when they gave me a 4-star award on my book than Rolling Stone. Rolling Stone for me is a fashionable icon. It's much of a, you know, their top 500 albums are debatable, or their top 300 guitarists are debatable. They started out initially, I believe, with authenticity, but I think through the last 20, 30 years, I think Rolling Stone magazine has become a little bit of a fashion fad. And most of my friends who are serious collectors, and a lot of them overseas collectors, also don't regard Rolling Stone as a major factor or milestone in terms of if something is actually really good or bad. I think London Record Collector are far more discerning unit in terms of discernment regarding the quality of the song and the band.
Do you think that would you comment that it's British and not American, or that's why it's better?
Well, I think in America everything is really big, and it gets so big that they lose sight of what I call the finer details. And I think that's what happened. Rolling Stone became like the Hard Rock Cafe. Let's look at the Hard Rock Cafe. I was at the Hard Rock Cafe in Eilat in January, February. Last year, September, I was at the Hard Rock Cafe in London. And if you walk in there, you wouldn't even think that it's a musical venue anymore, because there's no posters on the wall. It's all about how expensive the cappuccino is and if they can sell you a sweatshirt. You know, especially the London Hard Rock. So I think that's the way Rolling Stone have also gone in a sense.
Yeah, the music that you play, you feature a lot of British beats and psychedelia, and you seem to play a lot of grassroots and even the Monkees, which you seem to hold in high regard. But you don't play a lot of Elvis Presley.
Okay, firstly, the show is 60s and 70s. Elvis Presley went to the movies in the 60s. He did most of his music in the 50s. And pretty well in terms of rock and roll. In the 70s, his stuff became Las Vegas and appealed a lot to the upper echelon. And it's almost became adult contemporary in the sort of 70s. And that is mainly, I don't regard Elvis, as much as his voice was, or his name is bigger than his actual input. He didn't write any songs. His only credit was Heartbreak Hotel, out of respect. So in that sense, as much as he's the king, or regarded as the king, his actual input into songwriting wasn't really, it was nothing. It was really just his delivery of the songs, and of course his name and his charisma and all that. But if you compare that to, say, a guy like Joe South, he actually covered some of Joe South's songs. Joe South's input in terms of song delivery was massive compared to in terms of writing a song. So I know I don't really regard Elvis more. Elvis for me is more of an icon.
Yeah, but hence you play a lot of British beats and psychedelia and grassroots music.
Well, grassroots is interesting. You keep mentioning Monkeys and grassroots. I have a high regard for the Monkeys because of their musical ability, and also because although they were musicians, they weren't allowed to play the music in the initial stages. And then in the last stages, they actually were playing the music. They wrote incredible, well, they didn't write the songs, but Boyce and Hart, who were a group called Candy Store Prophets, wrote some of the most incredible songs. And they put Neil Diamond on the map, the Monkeys. And they put a number of songwriters like, I would say, Carole King on the map. The grassroots, again, Sloan and Barry were largely the songwriters. They were just incredible musicians. Their songs, I mean, they rolled forward like the Monkeys, but they were incredible. The actual song was an incredible craft that they brought forth. It had an intro, a motif, often a lead guitar break, which even the Beatles didn't often include in their songs. So they had a particular style, which I think is highly commendable in the rock world, the grassroots and the Monkeys.
I think they're very underrated in general. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Mike Nesmith in particular is probably the best of the four of them. But anyway, you often pride yourself in playing a song or a cover that's not been heard before. For example, the Hollies' "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother" was one, but you play so many different covers, and I must admit the majority of them are better than the so-called chart originals. Am I right?
Yes, I think one of the major reasons is because possibly nobody had heard the original version of "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother." A lot of people in South Africa would know the hit, but often they would say, "Oh, I didn't know this was a cover." Yeah. And that for me is so important, to be able to let them know who wrote the song initially. And often, if it's respectable, play. I mean, I don't play all the originals because sometimes the cover is better than the original. Although often the initial song is much better. I'll give you an example of "Everlasting Love" by the Love Affair. I mean, that rendition, although it's a cover, is better than, for example, the original version. So it's variable in terms of, but yes, I love to go back to the roots. That's because that's beautiful. People love hearing the original song.
Yeah, and you also you play a lot of guitar instrumentals, which is unusual as well on a radio show.
Well, you don't hear guitar instrumentals anymore. I think the guitar instrumental period was from about 1960 to about 63, 64, and then it just ended. So that beautiful surf guitar instrumentals, the James Bond themes, the spaghetti westerns, and of course the stuff that the Shadows and the Ventures pushed out, it was a wonderful era. I mean, Quentin Tarantino revived that guitar instrumental from Pulp Fiction, and people got to hear guitar instrumentals they'd never heard before. So I love it. I think it just lives within.
Well, so long as you just throw in the odd Frank Zappa in there now and again, you'll keep me happy anyway.
I see he's sitting beside you.
Oh, okay. No, that's just I'm sitting on the back here. Anyway, but you like to play your prog rock like from 11 o'clock? You sort of at the close of your show.
Yeah, look, at prog rock normally has lengthy songs, not lengthy 6-7 minutes. So I think that's an ideal time for people if they're easing down to listen to something rather more interesting. Magic Woman Touch, something like that in the realm of The Greatest Show on Earth, or a lengthy song by The Audience, or Camel, or Gravy Train. I wouldn't play that in the earlier stages. My songs are more 3-minute accessibility in the first 2.5 hours, and then in the latter stages, I like to move into something a little bit more serious, if you can call it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, and I also notice you often mention well-known musicians who tune in to listen to either their song or or others. Can you elaborate on which well-known musicians that you're aware of or regular
Sure.
listeners to the show?
Martin Griffiths of the Vegas Opera. He complimented me one day when I was playing their version of MacArthur's Park. The Virgin recording studio team, Malcolm Healy, Tom Newman, Paul Brett. It's actually incredible the amount of musicians that tune in. I don't mention it. I don't highlight my show. I should actually highlight it more, that I've got so-and-so listening in. For example, Sir Paul McCartney, when I played a rare South African song that he had never heard before, a Beatles cover by a South African band that had never been played at that stage by a British band. I was informed by the Beatles Rama Club that he was listening. I didn't go to that great lengths to find out now did he or if he didn't. They just informed me he would be tuning in, and it's just a great. It's often great when you hear somebody or somebody contacts says, "Oh, by the way, I'm from the guitarist from Jericho." I get this often, international bands, and I will actually get a WhatsApp from somebody that was in the group that can tell me something I don't know. I recall doing I didn't actually know that the Queen drummer was actually living in Cape Town.
Oh, okay.
And basically, I just want to mention that my battery's 10% here, so we'll roll on that. But I got a call. I mentioned about the movie, and I said, I wonder if it was really like that. And he phoned in and he said, he was very coarse about it, but he said it was exactly like that. And that was quite a shock for me.
Okay, now other shows. I mean, yours is quite a different show, and I mean that in the nicest way. But do you have any competition from other shows that pretend to be like yours?
Sadly, and I say this sadly because I wish there was. There is none. There's absolutely none. There is none. There are shows that claim to play retro, but it's the same old. You tune in, it'll be the same old #1 hit, and it just gets repeated over and over. And what I try to do with the Magic Bus is just not repeat the songs too often and give it a unique stance so people say, wow, we have not heard that in such a long time. And that's why I often focus on the B-sides or the live outtakes to give it a spirit-filled vibe.
Okay. Now, when you're in the studio, well, I think I've asked this question before. You don't use Google, or do you just, a little bird told me you just arrive with a piece of paper with a list of songs on, and the rest is in your head.
That is the truth. Mick, I tell you, I don't try and talk too much about them. I know often people think I'm sitting there with my rock history book. It just wouldn't be practical. I mean, to move pages, everything would be heard on the mic, and the book is just too freaking big to go looking for something. So I have a list of paper with the songs, and maybe a kind of a key reminder of something I might just notch with pen at the top, which will be 2 or 3 facts. So that is the truth. I arrive just with this one little piece of paper. I've often had the producer look at me, and I've heard that one particular well-known presenter at Cape Talk actually asked the producer, does he arrive with a book or does he go on to Google? And the producer honestly said, look, you're not going to believe this. He just arrives with a paper. I think it's because I'm a chess player. I can remember things quite well. I put it down to that. I teach chess, so.
Okay. All right. It's probably a very difficult question to answer, but your favorite groups, can you give me, I won't say 3, let's say at least 5, and who is your best? Whether it be groups or artists, or
is that albums also, or
the groups?
The groups.
Yeah, best band.
Well, the Grassroots is one of my top groups. Genesis, the very early stages of Genesis and Camel rank in the top 3 for me. I love those groups. I was brought up on it, and they really worked for me. Not the Monkees, funny enough. Not really. Love Forever Changes is one of my favorite albums. Arthur Lee's album Forever Changes. Love is just my heart is saying to that album. My heart pounds when I listen to that album. Yeah, I'd say that was really it. I love the blues. Obviously, I don't play the blues on my show. I'm a big lover of blues, so that's something that a lot of people don't know. One of my favorite groups is a group called Lighthouse from Canada. It's a brass kind of rock band with a lot of themes to it. I absolutely love that. And I'm a little bit of a sucker for themes, because even in the blues, I love the Keith Hartley band, which was also a brass blues. So I guess I'm a little bit of a brass lover, although I'm not a big jazz man. I love that kind of style, a unique individual stance of, say, the blues or rock. So yeah, those are more or less what you can call some of my favorite groups. Peter Hamill as a songsmith from Van der Graaf Generator. I rank him in my top 2 or 3. Dylan obviously reigns all supreme with me. And then a musician you probably heard me play quite a lot, although he only came out late 1979, although he did some country albums in the mid-70s, is Lee Clayton. And I regard Lee Clayton as one of the greatest, not only songsmiths, but singers, and lyrically enriched. I just love everything about him, and he just blew my mind.
Now, your favorite guitarist, or is that again a difficult to answer? I know you get this all the time. Let's break it into blues, rock, prog.
That's
break it into genres. Maybe that will help.
Well, Peter Green. When it comes to blues, Peter Green of ex Fleetwood Mac is probably one of my top guitarists. Stone the Crows is one of my favorite blues bands, although it's not straight blues. There's often rock involved. Sadly, pardon?
Roy Buchanan.
Yeah, he outweighs Eric Clapton as far as I'm concerned. Mike Bloomfield, another one of my favorites. A lot of respect for Clapton, but I would put Jeff Beck as a number 1 for me above Clapton for a number of reasons. Then you've obviously got those guitarists, those shadow guitarists that aren't often mentioned. They're also incredibly good. David Cross from T2. And they were remarkable guitarists also, but often never featured on the polls. In terms of progressive rock, Steve Howe, yes, I rank very highly. I think he's a phenomenal guitarist, multi-instrumentalist. I'm sure I'm echoing many out there. I'm not obscure with my choices.
Okay, what about your best song, or say your best 3?
Let's Live for Today, the Grassroots. It was originally done by the Rokes, an Italian group. I love that song. Yeah, sure.
There must be so many.
It is so difficult. My head is reeling with songs that I loved. To think of one particular song. There was a South African song by a group called Hawk, Dave Ornelis, Look Up Brother, that I just love, and I will always love that song. I knew the man very well, so that's a very special song for me. I would probably say, and I don't play folk music on my show, Sandy Denny, some of her songs really work for me very well.
Beautiful.
Some of those songs, they really do it for me. It's very difficult to go and track on 1 or 2 songs.
Okay, now let me just ask, I know during these dark days of COVID, you drive into Cape Town at night and it must have been pretty deserted. Is that quite true? Be pretty scared? Be quite eerie?
I tell you, Mick, I felt like the Amiga Man. I don't know if you ever saw that movie in the early days. No dogs, no the dustbins, the paper blowing in the road, no whores on the street, no rats, no beggars, just dark shadows, lights off, coming through the busiest hub, which is the waterfront. And this is at 8 p.m. at night, around about this year, March, April. If I told you, if somebody had said to me, there's a day you're going to drive into Cape Town and not see one vehicle, not even a blue light or a police car, just one military roadblock on the highway, it was uncanny, otherworldly, apocalyptic.